My name is Chloe, and tonight my husband, the most respected orthopedic surgeon in Boston, shattered 3 of my ribs because I broke an antique plate. When I woke up in the emergency room, he was holding my hand with tears in his eyes, playing the role of the devastated husband perfectly. He told the nurses I was clumsy. He told them I was mentally unstable. He told them I fell down the stairs again. He thought his medical license and his expensive Italian suit were a shield that would protect him forever. But there was one variable he forgot to calculate in his perfect equation of control. He did not know that the doctor on duty tonight was not one of his country club friends. And he certainly did not know that the images appearing on the MRI screen were about to turn him from a god in a white coat into a monster facing 20 years in prison. If you have ever been silenced by someone who valued their reputation more than your life, take a second to like this video and subscribe. You are going to want to see exactly how his perfect lie crumbled into dust. The first thing I felt was not pain, but the cold. A bone-deep shivering cold that seemed to radiate from the center of my chest outward. Then came the sound, the rhythmic screaming of a siren and the chaotic shouting of voices that sounded like they were underwater. BP is dropping to 90/60. Get the line in now, someone shouted. I tried to take a breath, but it felt like inhaling broken glass. A sharp, jagged agony ripped through my left side, making my vision go white. I tried to gasp, but only a choked gurgle came out. Chloe, can you hear me? I am right here, baby. I am right here. The voice was warm and rich, like melted chocolate. It was the voice that had convinced me to marry him 3 years ago. It was the voice that charmed donors into writing million-dollar checks for the hospital. And it was the voice that had whispered, "You did this to yourself," right after he kicked me in the ribs with his steel-toed loafer. I felt a hand enclose mine. To the paramedics hovering over me, it must have looked like a tender gesture of a loving husband, terrified of losing his wife. But I felt the reality. I felt his thumb dig precisely into the soft webbing between my thumb and index finger. It was a pressure point. He knew exactly where to press to cause blinding nausea without leaving a mark. It was a silent command. Do not speak. She fell down the stairs. Julian's voice was steady, projecting authority even over the noise of the ambulance. She slipped on the 4th step. She has a history of vestibular disorders and anemia. She gets dizzy spells. I have told her 1,000 times to be careful on those hardwood stairs. I felt the paramedic adjusting the oxygen mask on my face. His eyes were kind but hurried. Did she lose consciousness, Dr. Thorne? Yes, Julian answered for me. For about 2 minutes. I am Dr. Julian Thorne, Chief of Orthopedics at St. Luke's. I need you to radio ahead. Tell them to prep Trauma Room 1. I want a full workup, but let us be discreet. My wife has severe anxiety, and I do not want to trigger a panic attack with too many people. He was doing it again. He was weaving the net. Before we even reached the hospital doors, he was already painting the picture of me as the fragile, broken doll and himself as the saintly protector. I wanted to shake my head. I wanted to tear the mask off and scream that there were no stairs, that he had cornered me in the kitchen, that he had wrapped a towel around his fist so he would not bruise his knuckles when he struck me. But the pain in my chest was a heavy weight pinning me down, and the pressure on my hand was increasing. We burst through the doors of the emergency room in a flurry of activity. The bright fluorescent lights overhead flickered past like strobe lights. I smelled the rubbing alcohol and the metallic tang of blood. My blood. Somewhere in the haze I heard a nurse gasp, "Oh my God, is that Dr. Thorne?" "Yes, it is." Julian's voice shifted instantly. It became the voice he used for subordinates, firm, commanding, but with a hint of condescension. "My wife had an accident. I need saline wide open and 10 milligrams of morphine. And get me the attending physician, not a resident. I want the attending. Right away, doctor." The nurse scrambled to obey. Of course she did. Everyone obeyed Julian. He was a legend in this city. He saved children's legs. He rebuilt athletes' careers. Who would ever suspect that the hands which performed miracle surgeries were the same hands that knew exactly how to twist an arm to dislocate a shoulder without tearing the rotator cuff? "Excuse me." A new voice cut through the chaos. It was not deferential. It was tired, gravelly, and completely unimpressed. "Step back, please." I rolled my head to the side. A man in navy blue scrubs was standing at the foot of my gurney. He had messy graying hair and glasses that were sliding down his nose. He did not look like the polished doctors Julian associated with. He looked like a man who had seen too much trauma and had zero patience for ego. His badge read, Dr. Russo, Emergency Medicine. I am Dr. Thorne. Julian started straightening his posture even as he kept that vice-like grip on my hand. I am taking over her care. I have already ordered the "You are a family member right now, Dr. Thorne, not a treating physician." Russo interrupted without even looking at him. His eyes were locked on the monitor displaying my erratic heart rate. And in my ER, family members wait in the designated area. Nurse, get him a chair outside. The air in the trauma bay seemed to freeze. I felt Julian's hand spasm around mine. A jolt of terror shot through me. No one spoke to Julian like that. No one. Julian smiled. It was a terrifying expression that did not reach his eyes. It was the smile he gave me right before he locked me in the basement. Dr. Russo, I appreciate your adherence to protocol. However, my wife suffers from severe separation anxiety. She is currently medicated for depression and paranoid delusions. If I leave her side, she will become hysterical. It is in her best interest, and the interest of your staff, that I remain. I am her medical proxy. He was so smooth. He had just labeled me crazy and paranoid in 2 sentences, effectively discrediting anything I might say later. If I screamed now, they would just think it was the hysteria he warned them about. Russo finally looked at Julian. He adjusted his glasses. Paranoid delusions, he repeated flatly. Then he looked at me. His eyes were dark and intense, searching my face. Mrs. Thorne, can you hear me? I tried to nod, but the neck brace prevented it. I blinked. Tears leaked from the corners of my eyes, running hot into my ears. Can you tell me what happened? Russo asked. He leaned in closer, ignoring Julian. This was it. The moment. The door was open. Just 3 words. He kicked me. Just 3 words, and the nightmare could end. I opened my mouth. My lips were dry and cracked. Honey. Julian's face appeared in my line of sight, blocking Russo. He reached out and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. His fingers lingered near my temple, right over the spot where he had slammed my head against the granite island 3 months ago. The spot that still throbbed when it rained. Tell the doctor about the stairs, darling. Tell him how you tripped over your own feet again. I told you not to wear those slippery socks, didn't I? His eyes bored into mine. They were blue and cold like the deepest part of the ocean. In them I saw the promise. If you speak, I will make you wish you were dead. I will take everything. I will put you in a psych ward, and you will never see the sun again. I choked out. I am so clumsy. I fell. Good girl. The praise was silent, but I heard it in the slight exhale of his breath. Julian looked up at Russo with a tragic expression. You see, she is confused and in pain. Please just check for fractures so I can take her home. I have a full monitoring setup at our house. Hospitals just upset her. Russo did not move. He stood there for a long moment, looking from me to Julian. He was calculating something. I could see the gears turning behind those tired eyes. He did not like Julian. That was clear. But did he suspect? Or was he just another doctor annoyed by an arrogant colleague? We need to examine the chest and abdomen for internal trauma, Russo said finally. Nurse cut the shirt. No. Julian's hand shot out, stopping the nurse's shears. That is a vintage cashmere sweater. She loves it. Just pull it up, cut it. Russo ordered, his voice like a whip crack. Trauma protocol. We do not undress, we cut. Do it. The nurse hesitated for a fraction of a second, then snipped. The sound of the heavy fabric tearing was loud in the quiet room. She cut from the hem up to the collarbone and peeled the fabric back. I closed my eyes. I could not bear to see the look on their faces. I knew what was underneath. I lived with it every day. I showered in the dark so I did not have to look at it. My torso was a canvas of pain. There was the massive, angry purple welt on my right side where he had kicked me tonight. But that was just the centerpiece. Surrounding it were yellow and green shadows of old bruises. There were finger-shaped marks on my upper arms. There was a long, thin scar across my stomach from when he pushed me into a glass coffee table last year. The silence in the room was absolute. It felt heavy and suffocating. The nurse gasped softly. "Jesus," Russo whispered. I opened my eyes. Russo was staring at my body. His face was pale. He looked up at Julian, and for the first time there was open hostility in his expression. "You said she fell down the stairs tonight." Russo said, his voice dangerously low. "These bruises are in various stages of healing. Some are weeks old, some are months old. This is not a fall. This is a pattern." My heart hammered against my ribs. He saw it. He actually saw it. Hope flared in my chest, hot and desperate. Julian did not even blink. He let out a long, suffering sigh and shook his head, looking at me with infinite pity. "I know," he said softly. "It looks terrible, doesn't it? This is why I wanted to take her home. I wanted to spare her the embarrassment." "What are you talking about?" Russo asked. "Von Willebrand disease." Julian said the medical term rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "Type 2. She has a severe clotting disorder combined with early onset osteoporosis. I can show you her charts. If she bumps into a doorframe, she looks like she has been in a car wreck. It is a nightmare for her. She refuses to wear swimsuits. She hides her body because she is terrified people will judge her." He looked at the nurse, his eyes pleading for understanding. "You have no idea how hard it is for her. We have been trying to adjust her medication, but her liver enzymes are unstable. That is why she is so depressed. She feels like her own body is betraying her." The nurse's expression softened instantly. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed, looking at me with pity. "That must be awful." The hope in my chest died, extinguished as quickly as it had ignited. It was the perfect lie, a medical excuse that explained everything: the bruises, the fractures, the history of injuries. Who would question the chief of orthopedics about bone density and clotting factors? He had weaponized his knowledge against me. Russo did not soften. He stared at Julian and then back at the bruising. He traced the outline of a particularly dark bruise on my hip with his gloved finger. "Von Willebrand," Russo repeated. "Yes," Julian said, straightening his tie. "Now if you could just stitch up any lacerations and wrap the ribs, I will take her home. I can manage her pain medication myself." "No," Russo said. "Excuse me." Julian's smile faltered. "I said no." Russo turned to the nurse. "Even if she has a clotting disorder, the mechanism of injury today, a fall downstairs combined with rib fractures, presents a high risk of splenic rupture or pulmonary embolism. We are not discharging her. I want a full-body CT scan and an MRI of the spine and thoracic cavity, STAT, and I want a full tox screen. This is unnecessary radiation." Julian snapped, his facade cracking. "It is my ER." Russo stepped closer to Julian until they were toe-to-toe. "And in my ER, we practice defensive medicine. If she has a clotting disorder, then internal bleeding is a massive risk. I am not sending her home to die, Dr. Thorne, unless you want to sign an AMA against medical advice form right now and explain to the medical board why you removed a trauma patient with unstable vitals." It was a challenge, a direct threat to Julian's reputation. If he took me home and I died or had complications after refusing care, it would trigger an automatic investigation. Julian was arrogant, but he was calculated. He could not risk his license. "Fine," Julian hissed. "Do the scans. But I am coming with her." "Absolutely not." Russo signaled to the orderly. "The MRI zone is a restricted area. No metal. No family. You can wait in the lounge or you can wait in the parking lot. Those are your choices." Julian looked like he wanted to punch Russo. His jaw muscles jumped. He looked down at me. For a second, I thought he was going to refuse. I thought he was going to drag me off the gurney right there. But then he smiled, that terrifying smile again. "It is okay, baby." He smoothed my hair back again, his fingers lingering on my neck. "You go with the nice doctor. You get your pictures taken. I will be right here waiting for you. Do not say anything silly, okay? You know how confused you get when you are tired." He bent down and kissed my forehead. His lips were cold. I heard him whisper so low that only I could hear. "If you say one word, I will kill your brother. I will find a way. Remember who owns you." He straightened up and stepped back, putting his hands in his pockets, the picture of a supportive husband sending his wife off for treatment. "Take good care of her," he told the orderly. "She is my whole world." As the gurney began to move, I looked back. Julian was watching me. His eyes were dead voids. But Dr. Russo was watching Julian. And as we turned the corner, I saw Russo pull his phone out of his pocket and dial a number, his eyes never leaving my husband. The hallway was cold and bright. The orderly pushed me fast, the wheels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum. I was alone. For the first time in hours, I was physically separated from him, but his threat echoed in my mind. I will kill your brother. Leo. My sweet, gentle younger brother who thought Julian was a hero. Leo, who had just had a baby girl. Julian would do it. He knew prescriptions. He knew accidents. He could ruin Leo's life without ever lifting a finger. I squeezed my eyes shut as fresh tears leaked out. I was trapped. Even here in a hospital full of people, I was trapped in a cage made of fear and lies. We arrived at the imaging wing. The heavy doors swung open. The MRI machine loomed ahead, a giant white donut that promised to see inside me, to see the broken bones, to see the damage. But it could not see the fear. It could not picture the soul that was slowly being crushed. "Okay, Mrs. Thorne," the technician said, helping transfer me to the narrow table. "This will take about 45 minutes. It is going to be loud. Just try to relax and breathe. Relax." I almost laughed. The pain in my ribs was a jagged fire with every shallow breath. They slid me into the tube. The space was tight coffin-like. The machine began to whir and click. Clank, clank, clank. The noise was rhythmic, aggressive. It sounded like the lock on the basement door. Click. Suddenly I wasn't in the hospital anymore. The white ceiling of the MRI tunnel dissolved. I was back in the darkness. I was back where it all started 3 years ago. The memories I had tried to repress came flooding back, triggered by the confinement and the noise. I closed my eyes and let the past pull me under, back to the time when I was Chloe, the graphic designer, not Chloe, the victim. Back to the beginning of the end. Clank, clank, clank. The magnetic coils screamed around me, a rhythmic mechanical pounding that vibrated through the thin table into my spine. It was too loud. It was too close. The white plastic ceiling of the MRI tube was inches from my nose, pressing down on me, suffocating me. The air was stale and cold, pumped in by vents that sounded like wheezing lungs. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the white curved walls, but the darkness only made the sound louder. Clank, clank, clank. It did not sound like a medical machine anymore. It sounded like a lock tumbling. It sounded like the heavy deadbolt sliding home on the solid oak door of the walk-in closet in our master bedroom. Suddenly, I was not in the hospital. I was back in that closet, curled into a tight ball on the floor, wedged between his rows of pristine Italian suits and the shoe rack. The smell of cedar and expensive leather filled my nose, choking me. It was pitch black. Julian had installed a lock on the outside A-lock that only he had. The key to, he called it the timeout room. He said I needed a place to calm down when I got hysterical, when I started imagining things, when I accused him of hurting me. He would drag me in there by my hair, throw me onto the floor and slam the door. The click of the lock was the loneliest sound in the world. I remembered the first time he did it. I had been in there for 6 hours. I had screamed until my throat bled. I had pounded on the door until my knuckles were bruised and swollen. But no one came. The house was soundproofed. He had made sure of that. When he finally let me out, I was dehydrated, trembling, and so grateful just to see the light that I crawled to him and hugged his legs, apologizing for whatever I had done to make him angry. That was how he broke me, not just with the fists, but with the silence, with the darkness, with the terrifying realization that I was completely erased from the world whenever he chose. Clank, clank. The MRI machine jolted me back to the present, but the panic remained. My heart hammered against my bruised ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I tried to take a deep breath, but the pain in my chest flared hot and sharp, reminding me of the steel-toed loafer that had put me here. "Don't move," the technician said over the intercom, her voice distorted and metallic. "Just relax, Mrs. Thorne. We are almost done. Relax." How could I relax when every beat of the machine sounded like his footsteps coming down the hallway? How could I relax when I knew he was waiting for me outside, waiting to take me back to that house, back to the closet, back to the hell he had constructed so carefully? I focused on the rhythm of the machine, trying to separate the noise from the memory, trying to anchor myself in the reality that Dr. Russo was out there somewhere, that there were witnesses, that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. But as the clanking continued, my mind drifted further back past the closet, past the fear, past the violence, all the way back to the beginning, back to the time when Julian Thorne was not my jailer but my savior, back to the beautiful lie that had trapped me long before the first blow ever landed. 3 years ago, I was a different person. I was Chloe, the struggling graphic designer, living in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox in South Boston. My life was a mess of student loans, maxed out credit cards, and freelance gigs that barely paid the rent. I was drowning in anxiety, constantly checking my bank account, praying my debit card would not be declined when I bought groceries. I felt small, invisible, and overwhelmed by a world that seemed to demand more than I could give. Then came Julian. He walked into the small art gallery where I was showcasing my portfolio, and the air in the room seemed to change. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, and he carried himself with an easy confidence that I had only ever seen in movies. He stopped in front of my display, a series of digital abstract prints, and studied them with an intensity that made me blush. When he turned to look at me, his blue eyes were warm and inviting. "I want to buy them all," he said. Just like that. No negotiation. No hesitation. He wrote a check for $5,000 without blinking. That was how it started. He did not just date me. He rescued me. He swept into my chaotic life like a force of nature, bringing order and stability and luxury I had never dreamed of. On our third date, he found out about my credit card debt. The next day, he paid it off in full. Every cent. When I tried to protest, he just silenced me with a kiss and said, "Money is just a tool. Chloe, you have talent. You have a beautiful soul. You should not be weighed down by something as trivial as bills. Let me take care of you. Let me take care of you." Those words were the sweetest poison I had ever tasted. I had been taking care of myself for so long, struggling and failing, that the idea of someone else taking the burden felt like salvation. I fell in love with him so hard and so fast it, made me dizzy. He was perfect. He was a respected surgeon, wealthy, handsome, and he treated me like a princess. He moved me out of my cramped studio and into his brownstone on Beacon Hill. He bought me a new car. He encouraged me to quit my stressful freelance work and focus on my art. He isolated me from my stress, he said, but really he was isolating me from my independence. We were married 6 months after we met. The wedding was the social event of the season, a black tie affair at the Boston Public Library with 300 guests, towers of champagne, and a dress that cost more than my college tuition. I felt like Cinderella. I floated through the day in a haze of joy and disbelief, convinced that I was the luckiest woman alive. My parents were awestruck. My friends were envious. Everyone told me I had won the lottery, and I believed them. I looked at Julian standing at the altar, his eyes shining with tears as I walked down the aisle, and I thought I had found my happily ever after. The mask did not slip until the honeymoon. We were in a private villa in Tuscany overlooking the vineyards. It was our first night as husband and wife. The air was warm and smelled of jasmine and earth. We were having dinner on the terrace by candlelight, sharing a bottle of vintage red wine that Julian had ordered, specially. I was laughing at something he said, feeling giddy with wine and happiness when I reached for my glass. My hand slipped. It was a tiny clumsiness, a moment of distraction. The glass tipped over, sending a stream of dark red wine cascading down the front of my white silk dress. The dress he had bought me, the dress he had chosen. "Oh no!" I gasped, grabbing a napkin and dabbing frantically at the stain. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry." "Julian." I looked up, expecting him to laugh, expecting him to tell me it did not matter that we could buy a dozen dresses just like it. But he was not laughing. He was staring at the stain on my chest, and his face had gone completely blank. The warmth was gone from his eyes, replaced by a cold, dead stillness that sent a shiver down my spine. "You ruined it," he said softly. I froze the napkin hovering over the stain. It is just wine, Julian. I can get it dry cleaned. It will come out. He stood up slowly, placing his napkin on the table with precise, deliberate movements. He walked around the table until he was standing behind my chair. I held my breath, confused by the sudden tension in the air. Stand up, he commanded. I stood up, turning to face him. Julian, what is wrong? It is just a dress, smack. The sound was loud in the quiet night, shocking and sharp. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned. I brought my hand up to my face, staring at him in stunned silence. He had slapped me. My perfect husband, my savior. He had hit me. He looked at his hand, then back at me. His expression softened. But it was not an apology. It was a look of disappointment, of pained patience, like a parent scolding an unruly child. I just want you to be perfect, Chloe, he said, his voice gentle again. I give you everything. I give you the world, and you treat it with such carelessness. You ruin beautiful things. He reached out and stroked my burning cheek, wiping away the tear that had escaped my eye. Do not cry, he whispered. You know I hate it when you cry. It makes you look ugly. Go inside. Take off that ruined dress and wash your face. We will start over, and try not to be so clumsy next time. Okay? For me, I nodded, mute with shock. I went inside. I took off the dress. I washed my face, and when I came back out, I smiled because I did not know what else to do. I told myself he was just stressed. I told myself it was the wine. I told myself it was my fault for ruining the perfect moment. I buried the fear deep down and let him hold me. Let him tell me he loved me. Let him convince me that the violence was just another form of his perfectionism. That was the first time. But as I lay in the loud, cold tunnel of the MRI machine, feeling the ache in my ribs, I knew now what I did not know then. It was never about the dress. It was never about the wine. It was about ownership. He had bought me just like he bought those paintings, and he expected his property to be flawless, and if it was not, he would break it until it was. The isolation did not happen all at once, like a door slamming shut. It was a slow, insidious erosion, like the tide eating away at a cliff, until the ground beneath my feet simply collapsed. Julian was too smart to forbid me from seeing my friends or my family. He knew that would raise red flags. Instead, he waged a war of attrition on my credibility. He weaponized his medical degree and his charming smile to convince the world that I was the problem, that I was the one who needed to be managed. It started with the pills. He began bringing them home from the hospital, little blue tablets that he said were for my anxiety. He told me they would help me relax, help me sleep, but they just made me foggy and sluggish. I would lose track of time. I would forget conversations, and when I did, he would be there with a sad, patient smile to point out my confusion. See, Chloe, he would say softly, you are forgetting things again. You are spiraling. I am just trying to help you. Then came the meeting with my parents. It was a Sunday afternoon, about 6 months into our marriage. My mother and father had driven up from Connecticut for lunch. I was so excited to see them, to feel a connection to my old life. But Julian met them at the door before I could even get downstairs. I listened from the top of the landing, my heart pounding as he spoke to them in hushed, serious tones. I am worried about her. He told them, his voice heavy with concern. She has been having episodes. She gets paranoid. She thinks people are watching her. And lately she has started hurting herself. I found her banging her head against the wall the other night. When I tried to stop her, she scratched me. It was a lie, a monstrous, disgusting lie. But he said it with such conviction, with the weight of his medical authority backing him up, that my parents believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was Dr. Julian Thorne. He saved lives. And I was the daughter who had always been a little too sensitive, a little too artistic, a little too emotional. When I finally came downstairs, my mother looked at me, not with love, but with fear. She saw the bruises on my arms, the ones Julian had put there the night before, and she did not see abuse. She saw confirmation of what Julian had just told her. She saw a woman who was out of control, a woman who was hurting herself. "We think it is best if we give you some space for a while," my father said, refusing to meet my eyes. "Julian says you need a calm environment. He says our visits might be triggering your episodes. We just want you to get better, Chloe. Listen to your husband. He knows what is best for you." I tried to protest. I tried to tell them the truth, but the more I cried, the more I pleaded, the more I looked exactly like the unstable, hysteric Julian had painted me to be. They left an hour later, and as their car pulled away, Julian put his arm around my waist and squeezed until I gasped. "See?" he whispered in my ear. "Even they know you are crazy. You have no one left. Chloe, no one but me." After that, the physical cage tightened. He installed the cameras the week after my parents' visit. He called it a security upgrade. He said there had been break-ins in the neighborhood, but I watched him set them up. I watched him check the feeds on his phone. He did not point them at the windows or the doors. He pointed them at the living room, at the kitchen, at the hallway leading to the bedroom. He covered every angle, creating a digital panopticon where I was the only prisoner. "I am doing this for your safety," he said, adjusting a lens in the corner of the dining room. "You know how you get. You black out. You forget what you do. This way, when you hurt yourself and try to blame me, I will have proof. It is for your own protection." He made me install Life 360 on my phone, an app designed for parents to track their children. He set the geofencing so that if I left the house for any reason, his phone would alert him immediately. I was not allowed to go to the grocery store without permission. I was not allowed to go for a walk. He checked the logs every night, questioning every minute. If the GPS showed I had stopped at a coffee shop for 5 minutes longer than expected, I paid for it with pain. I was 29 years old, but I had less freedom than a toddler. I was a prisoner in my own home, watched by unblinking electronic eyes, tracked by satellites, drugged into compliance, and gaslit into believing that maybe, just maybe, I really was the crazy one. But tonight, the fog had lifted just enough for me to make a mistake. A fatal, terrible mistake. It was supposed to be a special dinner. Julian had invited a colleague from the hospital, Dr. Henderson, but at the last minute, Henderson had canceled. Julian was already in a foul mood when he came home. He poured himself a scotch and sat at the head of the long mahogany dining table. Watching me set out the food, I was nervous. My hands were shaking partly from the fear that was my constant companion, and partly from the side effects of the medication he forced down my throat every morning. We were using the good china, the antique Limoges, said his grandmother had brought over from France. The plates were over 100 years old, delicate as eggshells, and worth more than my life. In his eyes, I was clearing the appetizer plates, reaching across the table to take his empty bowl. He moved suddenly, shifting his elbow, and I flinched. It was a reflex, a survival instinct honed over 3 years of violence, but the flinch made me jerk my hand. The bowl slipped from my fingers. Time seemed to suspend. I watched the white porcelain disc fall in slow motion, tumbling through the air, flipping once before it hit the edge of the granite table and shattered. The sound was explosive. A sharp, ear-splitting crack followed by the tinkling of 100 tiny shards hitting the floor. I froze. My heart stopped beating. My lungs stopped drawing air. I stood there, clutching the air where the bowl had been staring down at the wreckage of the antique china. I waited for the scream. I waited for the explosion of rage. I waited for him to flip the table, to grab me by the throat, to start the beating immediately. But he did nothing. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not even look at the broken plate. He just sat there, calmly sipping his scotch, the ice cubes clinking softly against the glass. The silence was heavy, suffocating. It pressed against my eardrums, louder than any scream could have been. "Julian," I whispered, my voice trembling so hard the words barely formed. "I am so sorry. It slipped. I will fix it. I will glue it." "Sit down," he said softly. He pointed to my chair, the one directly across from him. "Sit down and eat your dinner." "Chloe." I sank into the chair, my legs turning to jelly. I looked at the plate of roast duck in front of me. The smell made me nauseous. I picked up my fork, my hand. Shaking so violently the metal rattled against the china. "Eat," he commanded, taking a bite of his own food. "The duck is excellent. You outdid yourself." He ate his entire meal. He ate slowly, methodically, cutting each piece of meat with surgical precision, chewing thoroughly, savoring every bite. He talked about his day at the hospital, about a complex spinal fusion he had performed, about the incompetence of his residents. He acted as if the shattered heirloom on the floor did not exist, as if his wife was not sitting across from him, hyperventilating with terror. It was psychological torture. He was making me wait, making me stew in my own fear, letting the anticipation of the punishment break me down before he even lifted a finger. When he finished the last bite, he placed his knife and fork parallel on the plate. He picked up his napkin, dabbed the corners of his mouth, and set it on the table. Then he looked at me. His eyes were dead flat, devoid of any humanity. "Clear the table," he said. I scrambled up, gathering the dishes as fast as I could, trying to be useful, trying to appease him. I carried the stack to the kitchen, my hands slick with sweat. When I came back, he was standing by the shards of the broken bowl. He looked at the mess, then he looked at me. "You know, I have to do this, right?" he said, his voice reasonable, calm, almost sad. "You broke something valuable. Chloe, you were careless. Carelessness requires correction. If I do not correct you, you will never learn. You will just keep destroying everything beautiful in this house." He took off his jacket, folding it neatly over the back of the chair. Then he took off his watch, placing it on the sideboard. He unbuttoned his cuffs and rolled up his sleeves, revealing his strong forearms, the arms of a surgeon who reset bones for a living. Then he walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where we kept the dish towels. He took out a thick cotton towel and began to wrap it around his right hand. He wrapped it tight, layer over layer, protecting his knuckles, shielding his skin. It was a technique he had perfected. He knew that hitting someone with a bare fist could leave bruises on his own hand evidence. He knew that a towel dampened the surface. Impact but transmitted the kinetic energy deep into the tissue, deep into the bone. He walked towards me. I backed away until I hit the counter. There was nowhere to go. The kitchen island blocked me on the left, the wall on the right. "Please, Julian," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "It was an accident. Please do not." He did not run. He did not lunge. He just stepped into my space, invading my world, sucking the oxygen out of the room. "Hands up," he said. I raised my arms instinctively, trying to cover my face, trying to protect my head. "Good girl," he whispered. And then he struck. He did not go for the face. He never went for the face. The face was public. The face was what the world saw. He drove his towel-wrapped fist into my stomach just below the diaphragm. The air exploded out of my lungs. I folded over. Gasping, unable to breathe, unable to scream. He grabbed my hair with his left hand, yanking my head down, holding me in place like a specimen pinned to a board. "This is for the plate," he grunted. He drove his fist into my side, right into the floating ribs. The pain was blinding, white-hot, agonizing. I felt the bones snap, a sickening crunch that vibrated through my entire skeleton. He let go of my hair, and I collapsed to the floor, curling into a fetal ball, trying to protect my broken side. But he was not done. He stood over me, looking down like a god, judging a sinner. "You are so clumsy, Chloe," he said, shaking his head. "You really need to watch where you are going." He pulled back his leg and kicked me. It was a calculated kick, precise and powerful, aimed perfectly at the exact spot he had just punched. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He knew anatomy better than anyone. He knew exactly where the ribs were weakest. He knew exactly how much force it took to shatter them without puncturing a lung. Immediately, the impact lifted me off the floor. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of agony. I tried to scream, but there was no air left in the universe. Darkness encroached at the edges of my vision, black spots dancing in front of my eyes. Julian crouched down beside me, peeling the towel off his hand. He leaned close to my ear. Next time, he whispered, "Be more careful." And then the darkness swallowed me whole. The last thing I heard was the sound of him walking to the sink to wash his hands, as if he had just finished a dirty job and was ready to move on with his evening. When I woke up, the sirens were wailing and the nightmare in the hospital began. But Julian had made a mistake. He thought he had broken me completely. He thought I was just a body to be managed. But pain has a way of clarifying things. And as I lay in that MRI machine, listening to the clanking magnets, remembering the cold calculation in his eyes, I realized something. I was going to survive this, and I was going to make sure he never hurt anyone ever again. The technician slid me out of the machine, and the cold air of the hospital room hit my skin again, but it was nothing compared to the chill settling in my heart. I knew who was waiting for me outside. I knew the performance that was about to continue. The orderly wheeled me back to the trauma bay, and there he was, Julian, standing right where he said he would be, checking his watch with a look of practiced concern. As soon as he saw me, his face transformed into a mask of relief, and he rushed over, taking my hand again, resuming his post as the devoted guardian. "Everything went well?" he asked the orderly, ignoring me completely. "Yes, sir. Dr. Russo is reviewing the images now," the orderly muttered, looking uncomfortable under Julian's scrutiny. "Good." Julian squeezed my hand, and I felt the warning pressure return instantly. "Just relax now, darling. The family is on their way. They were so worried when I called them. I told them not to come. But you know your mother insisted." My stomach dropped. The family, my parents, my younger brother Leo, they were coming here to the scene of the crime. And for a fleeting, desperate second, I thought maybe this was a good thing. Maybe my father would see the bruises and know. Maybe my mother would look in my eyes and see the terror. But then I remembered the last 3 years. I remembered how they looked at Julian with reverence, how they constantly told me I was the lucky one, how they treated him like the son they never had, and treated me like the burden he graciously accepted. The curtain whipped back, and my mother burst in, her designer purse swinging on her arm, her face flushed, not with concern for me, but with the frantic energy of a socialite, inconvenienced by a scandal. "Oh my God, Julian!" she gasped, rushing past the foot of my bed straight to my husband. "Are you all right? You sounded so shaken on the phone." "I am fine, Eleanor." Julian sighed bravely, offering her a sad smile. "It has just been a long night. I am just worried about Chloe." My mother finally turned to look at me, lying in the hospital bed with a neck brace and an IV drip. Her eyes narrowed, and I saw the familiar disappointment etched into the lines around her mouth. "Chloe, honestly," her voice was sharp, cutting through the sterile air like a knife. "Why are you so careless? You know you have balance issues. You know you are supposed to be careful." We were in the middle of dinner with the Hendersons when Julian called. We had to leave right before dessert. "It was incredibly rude, Mom," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "I am hurt." "You are always hurt," she snapped, waving her hand dismissively. "You are always falling or tripping or bumping into things. Look at poor Julian. He has been working all day saving lives, and now he has to spend his night in an emergency room holding your hand because you cannot walk down a flight of stairs properly. You are exhausting, Chloe. You really are." My father walked in behind her, shaking his head. He clapped a hand on Julian's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity between men who tolerate difficult women. "Sorry about this, son," he rumbled, his voice deep and authoritative. "I know you have that big conference tomorrow. You should go home and get some rest. We can sit with her." No, I would never leave her," Julian said, his voice dripping with nobility. "She is my wife. It is my duty to care for her, even when she makes it difficult." He was doing it perfectly. He was validating their annoyance while making himself look like a saint. He was feeding their narrative that I was the problem, the chaotic element in their orderly lives, and he was the glue holding it all together. Leo, my younger brother, hovered in the doorway looking torn. He had always been soft. Sweet Leo, the only one in the family who occasionally asked if I was happy. But he was weak. He idolized Julian. He wanted to be just like him. Successful, commanded, respected. "Hey, Chloe," Leo said softly, stepping forward. "You okay?" Before I could answer, Julian cut in. "She is sedated, Leo. She is very confused right now. The doctors think she might have had a manic episode that caused the fall. We are looking into adjusting her meds." "Oh!" Leo's face fell, and he took a step back, looking at me with pity instead of empathy. "Jesus, Chloe. Again, you have got to get it together. You are scaring everyone." I looked at them, my biological family, the people who were supposed to protect me. They were standing around my bed looking down at me with judgment and irritation. They did not see the terror in my eyes. They did not see the bruises that were hidden under the hospital gown. They only saw what Julian wanted them to see, a broken, hysterical woman who was dragging down their golden boy. I felt a sob rising in my throat, choking me. I was completely alone. They were never going to believe me. If I told them right now that he kicked me, that he shattered my ribs, they would think it was the mania talking. They would think I was making up stories to get attention, just like Julian had warned them would. But then the curtain moved again, and she walked in. Nia Leo's wife, my sister-in-law. She was different. She was not part of their country club world. She was a corporate litigator, a black woman who had fought tooth and nail to earn her place in a top Boston law firm. She was sharp observant, and she had never bought into the cult of Julian Thorne. While the rest of my family fawned over him, Nia just watched him with cool, detached eyes. She was the only person who ever asked me specific questions about my life, not just about how Julian was doing. She walked into the trauma bay wearing a sharp trench coat, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She did not rush to Julian. She did not look at my parents. She walked straight to the side of the bed opposite my husband and looked directly at me. Her eyes were dark and intense, scanning my face, my neck brace, the IV line. She did not say anything at first. She just looked, and for the first time that night I felt like someone was actually seeing me. "What is the prognosis?" she asked, her voice calm and professional, cutting through my mother's complaining. Julian stiffened slightly. He did not like Nia. She asked too many questions. She did not defer to him. "Fractured ribs," Julian answered smoothly. "Potential internal bleeding. We are waiting on the MRI results. But it looks like another fall. She is very clumsy lately. Nia, you know how it is." Nia did not look at him. She kept her eyes on me, watching the way I flinched when Julian shifted his weight, watching the way my eyes darted to him before I answered any questions. "Is she clumsy?" she asked quietly. "Or is she terrified?" The question hung in the air, sucked the oxygen right out of the room. My mother gasped. "Nia, what a horrible thing to say. Of course she is not terrified. Julian is an angel. He takes better care of her than she deserves." Nia ignored her. She took a step closer to the bed. Her eyes dropped to Julian's hand, the hand that was still gripping mine, the hand that looked comforting to everyone else, but was actually a steel trap. "You are holding her hand very tight, Julian," Nia observed. Her voice was light, almost conversational, but there was a razor edge underneath it. "You might want to let go. You are cutting off her circulation." Julian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, am I?" He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I am just so worried. I did not realize." He loosened his grip, but he did not let go. He stroked the back of my hand with his thumb, a rhythmic motion that felt like a threat. I tried to pull my hand away, but he tightened his fingers just enough to stop me. He stared at Nia, challenging her, daring her to push further. Nia did not back down. She was a lawyer. She lived for conflict. She stared right back at him, her gaze dissecting him, peeling back the layers of charm to find the rot underneath. She saw it. I knew she saw it. She saw the control. She saw the fear. She saw the way I was shrinking away from him, trying to make myself as small as possible. Suddenly, Nia turned to the small table beside the bed, where a tray of lukewarm hospital coffee and water pitchers sat. "Oh, Leo," she said, her voice changing tone, becoming brisk, demanding, "Grab me a coffee, would you?" I came straight from the office, and I am exhausted. Leo jumped, happy to have a task. "Sure, babe." "Wait, let me help you," Nia said. She reached for a cup, but her movement was too fast, too large. Her arm swept out and knocked a full cup of steaming black coffee right off the tray. It splashed directly onto Julian's pristine Italian loafers and the cuffs of his tailored trousers. Julian shouted, jumping back and releasing my hand as the hot liquid soaked into his expensive clothes. "You stupid!" He cut himself off, glancing at my parents, realizing he had almost broken character. He took a deep breath, forcing a tight smile. Accidents happen, I suppose. Oh my God. Julian, I am so sorry, Nia said, throwing her hands up in mock horror. Her face was a mask of apology, but her eyes were cold, dead serious. I am so clumsy, just like Chloe. Right? I guess it runs in the family by marriage. My mother was immediately fluttering around, Julian grabbing paper towels, acting like he had been shot. Julian, you poor thing. Those are Ferragamo, aren't they? Go clean up, darling. Go to the restroom. There is one right down the hall. You cannot sit in wet clothes. Julian looked at Nia, then at me. He did not want to leave. He did not want to leave me alone with her even for a minute. I could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing the risk. Go ahead, Julian, Nia said sweetly. I will stay right here with Chloe. We'll make sure she does not fall out of bed. He hesitated one last second, then glared at Nia, a look of pure venom that vanished as soon as he turned to my mother. Thank you, Eleanor. I will be right back. Do not let her agitate herself. He stormed out of the trauma bay, my parents following him, fussing over his ruined shoes. Leo trailed behind them, oblivious as always, and then it was just us, me and Naya. The second they were gone, the air in the room changed. Naya stopped acting. She dropped the facade of the clumsy sister-in-law. She stepped up to the bed, leaning close, her face inches from mine. Listen to me, she whispered, her voice urgent, low, intense. I do not have much time. He will be back in 2 minutes. Look at me, Chloe. I looked at her, trembling, tears leaking from my eyes. I was so scared. Scared that she would ask, and I would freeze. Scared that she would ask, and I would tell. Nia reached out, but she did not touch my hand. She touched the hospital gown gently, pulling the sleeve up just an inch, exposing my wrist. There was a bruise there, a fresh one blooming purple and ugly against my pale skin. It was distinct, oval-shaped, about the size of a large coin. I saw him grabbing you earlier, Nia hissed, looking at the bruise. Then she looked at my other arm where faint yellow marks lingered from last week. Chloe, listen to me carefully. I am a lawyer. I deal with evidence for a living. I know what accidental injuries look like, and I know what defensive wounds look like. She pointed to the bruise on my wrist, her finger hovering just above the skin without touching it. That is a thumbprint, Chloe. That is a thumbprint. Bruised stairs do not have thumbs. My breath hitched. The room spun. Stairs do not have thumbs. It was so simple, so obvious, so undeniable. Nia locked eyes with me, her gaze fierce, demanding. You did not fall, did you? He did this. He has been doing this. I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell the lie to protect myself, but the words stuck in my throat. I looked at Nia, and I saw something I had not seen in 3 years. I saw a lifeline. I saw someone who was not buying the act, someone who was willing to stand between me and the monster. He is going to kill me, I whispered. The truth slipped out before I could stop it, quiet and terrified. Nia's face did not register shock. It registered confirmation. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. Okay, she said. Okay. We are going to fix this, but I need you to be brave. Can you be brave for me? I shook my head, panic rising. He said he would kill Leo. He said he would destroy everyone. He is lying. Nia cut in, fierce and low. He is a bully and a coward. Bullies lie to keep you afraid. But he messed up tonight, Chloe. He messed up big time because he let me see this. She gestured to the bruise. We have to move fast. He will be back any second. You need to tell the doctor, not the nurses, not your parents, the doctor in charge. I saw him looking at Julian earlier. He knows something is wrong. You have to confirm it. I can't, I sobbed. He is the chief of orthopedics. They will never believe me over him. They will if you give them a reason to, Nia said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen quickly, then shoved it under my pillow. Keep this, she whispered. Do not let him see it. It is recording. If he comes back in here and threatens you, if he says anything, it will be on tape. That is your insurance. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, heavy and fast. It was him. Nia pulled back instantly, smoothing her coat, stepping away from the bed, putting distance between us, just as the curtain ripped open. Julian was back. His pants were wet, stained dark with coffee, but his face was composed, calm, terrifying. He looked from Nia to me, analyzing the scene, looking for cracks. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, his voice smooth, but his eyes hard as flint. "Fine," Nia said breezily. "Just chatting about paint colors for the nursery. Chloe thinks a soft yellow would be nice." Julian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "A shark," sensing blood in the water. "Nia," he said, stepping into the room, reclaiming his territory, standing right beside my head. "I know you are a lawyer and you think everyone is guilty until proven innocent. But do not bring that paranoia into my family. My wife is fragile. She needs support, not interrogation." My parents crowded in behind him, nodding in agreement. "Really?" "Nia," my father grumbled. "Stop bothering the girl. She needs rest." Nia looked at them all, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at me one last time, a silent message passing between us. "Be brave. I am just looking out for her." "Julian," Nia said coolly. "That is what family does, right?" Julian laughed, a cold sound. "Right? Well, I am here now. I will take over. You can go." He reached for my hand again, covering the bruise on my wrist with his palm, his fingers digging in, reclaiming his possession. I felt the phone buzzing softly under my pillow. Nia had left it recording. She had given me a weapon, but now I had to use it, and I was terrified because I knew the next few minutes would determine whether I lived or died. The air in the trauma bay grew heavy and suffocating the moment Julian stepped back into the square of sterile space surrounding my bed. He did not look at me, not at first. He looked at Nia. His eyes were not angry anymore. They were clinical, detached, like a surgeon surveying a tumor that needed to be excised. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed at the coffee stain on his trousers, a slow, deliberate movement that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "You know, Nia," he began, his voice dropping to that reasonable baritone that won him awards and board seats. "I have always admired your tenacity. Corporate litigation is a shark tank, and you have survived in it for a long time. It takes a certain kind of mind to see the world that way, to see every interaction as a potential lawsuit, to see every person as a potential defendant. It is a survival mechanism. I get it." He walked around the foot of the bed, placing himself physically between Nia and my parents, creating a wall. I watched him through half-closed eyes, my heart hammering against the hard plastic of the phone hidden beneath my head. I prayed the recording app was still running. I prayed the battery would not die. I prayed he would not see the slight lump under the pillow. "But right now, you are not in a courtroom." Julian continued, taking a step toward Nia, forcing her to step back. "You are in a hospital room with a family that is trying to process a trauma. You are looking for a fight where there isn't one. You are looking for a villain because that is what you are paid to do. But look at where you are doing it. You are interrogating a woman who just suffered a severe fall. You are accusing a husband who has spent the last 3 hours terrified he was going to lose his wife." He turned to my parents, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "I try to be patient. Eleanor Douglas, I really do. But this is crossing a line," she is whispering in Chloe's ear, upsetting to her, filling her head with paranoid nonsense right when her blood pressure needs to be stable. "Look at the monitor." He pointed a manicured finger at the screen above my head. My heart rate was spiking, 120, 130. The numbers flashed red, confirming his narrative, but my heart wasn't racing because of Nia. It was racing because he was back. It was racing because I knew what happened to people who crossed Julian Thorne. My mother looked at the monitor, then at Nia, her face twisted with indignation. "Nia, honestly?" She snapped, her voice shrill. "How can you be so insensitive? Look at what you are doing to her." Julian is right. You have always been like this, always looking for the dark side of everything. Just because you deal with criminals all day does not mean you have to treat us like ones. This is a family matter, not a deposition. "Leo?" My brother looked at his wife with pleading eyes. "Nia, please, just let it go. You are making everyone upset." Nia stood her ground. She did not shrink away, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She was outnumbered. She was the outsider, the disruptive force in the perfect tableau of the Matthews family. She looked at me one last time, her eyes searching mine, begging me to speak up, to say the words that would validate her suspicion. "Tell them, Chloe," she said softly. "Just tell them what you told me about the thumbprint." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. Julian's gaze felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, crushing the breath out of me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just raised one eyebrow slightly, a micro-expression that I knew intimately. It meant, "Go ahead. Try it. See what happens to Leo. See what happens to you." I looked at Nia, the only person who had tried to save me, the only person who saw me, and I betrayed her. "I don't know what you're talking about." I whispered the lie, tasting like ash in my mouth. I fell. "Nia, please, just stop." Nia flinched as if I had slapped her. Light in her eyes dimmed. She looked from me to Julian, and she saw the smirk that he didn't bother to hide from her. "There you have it," Julian said, his voice dripping with triumph. "She is confused, Nia. She is in pain, and you are making it worse. I think it is time for you to leave. My wife needs peace, not your toxic suspicion." My father stepped forward, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Take your wife home, son. This is not the place for her dramatics. We will handle things from here." Leo looked down at his shoes, ashamed, avoiding Nia's gaze. "Come on, Nia. Let's go." Nia straightened her coat, maintaining her dignity, even as she was being ejected. "I am leaving," she said, her voice steady. "But I am not wrong. And you?" She looked directly at Julian. "You are going to slip up eventually. You are arrogant, Julian, and arrogant men always make mistakes." "Get out," Julian hissed, the veneer of politeness vanishing for a split second. Nia turned and walked out the curtain, swishing shut behind her, leaving me trapped once more. The phone under my pillow felt like a burning coal. I was terrified he would hear it, terrified he would sense it, but he was too focused on his victory, too focused on consolidating his control. He turned back to my parents, shaking his head with a weary sigh. "I am so sorry you had to see that. I don't know why she has such a vendetta against me. I have tried to welcome her into the family, but she has always been jealous, I suppose. Some people just cannot stand to see others happy. You are a saint." "Julian," my mother cooed, patting his arm. "Do not listen to her. We know the truth. We know how much you love Chloe." "I do," Julian said, looking down at me with those dead shark eyes. "I love her more than anything, and that is why I cannot let her stay here anymore." "What do you mean?" my father asked. "Look at this place." Julian gestured around the trauma bay with disdain. "It is chaotic. It is dirty. The staff is incompetent. That resident Dr. Russo, he has no idea what he is doing. He wanted to expose Chloe to unnecessary radiation. He wanted to keep her here overnight in a room full of germs and noise. She is fragile. Douglas, she needs a controlled environment. She needs peace and quiet. She needs me." He was pivoting, shifting the narrative again, moving the pieces on the board. He knew Dr. Russo was a threat. He knew the MRI results were coming. He had to get me out of there before the evidence became undeniable. "I am taking her home," Julian announced, taking charge. "I have a full medical suite at the house. I can monitor her vitals. I can administer her pain meds. I can make sure she doesn't get an infection. Here she is, just a number. To me, she is everything. But is that safe?" My mother asked, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "The paramedics said it was serious." "The paramedics are technicians," Julian said dismissively. "I am a surgeon. Eleanor, I deal with trauma every day. I know what she needs better than anyone in this building. Trust me." He looked at them, expecting compliance, demanding it. And as always, they folded. They wanted to believe him. It was easier to believe him. It was easier to believe that their daughter was in the hands of a brilliant doctor than to believe she was the victim of a monster. "Okay, Julian," my father said, "if you think that is best." "I do," Julian said. He turned to the nurse who had been standing in the corner, wide-eyed and silent throughout the family drama. "Disconnect the IV," he ordered. "I cannot do that, sir," the nurse stammered. "The attending physician has not authorized a discharge." "I am authorizing it," Julian snapped. I am her husband, and I am a physician. I am taking her against medical advice. Bring me the forms." The nurse hesitated, looking at the monitor, then at me. "I have to call Dr. Russo," she said, backing toward the door. "Call him!" Julian shouted, his patience snapping. "Call whoever you want, but get these tubes out of my wife now. We are leaving." He reached out and grabbed the IV line himself. I gasped as he yanked the tape from my skin, the needle tearing free. A drop of blood welled up on my arm, crimson against the pale skin. "Julian," my mother gasped. "It is fine," Julian said, his voice calm again instantly. He grabbed a piece of gauze and pressed it to my arm. "See, simple. I will wrap it properly in the car." He began to unhook the leads from my chest, silencing the beeping monitor. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. It meant I was being disconnected from the system, disconnected from the witnesses, disconnected from safety. "Get up, Chloe," he said, sliding his arm behind my shoulders, forcing me to sit up. The world spun. Gray spots danced in my vision. A scream of agony ripped through my chest as my broken ribs shifted, grating against each other. I cried out, grabbing his arm, my nails digging into his expensive suit jacket. "It hurts," I sobbed. I can't move. Shh, shh, it is okay." Julian whispered, his lips brushing my ear. "You can move. You have to move. Unless you want to stay here and let them experiment on you. Unless you want everyone to know how crazy you are." He hauled me up, dragging me toward the edge of the bed. My legs dangled uselessly, dead weight dragging on the floor. I couldn't feel them. I couldn't make them work. "Bring a wheelchair," he barked at the nurse, who was staring in horror. She scrambled to obey, pushing a wheelchair forward. Julian dropped me into it, none too gently. A fresh wave of nausea washed over me, and I slumped forward, fighting the urge to vomit. "There we go," he said, smoothing my hospital gown down over my knees, covering the bruises. "We are going home, baby. We are going home where I can take care of you properly." My parents stood back, watching uncertainly. "Should we follow you?" my father asked. "No," Julian said quickly. "You guys go home. Get some rest. It has been a traumatic night for everyone. I will get her settled and call you in the morning. She needs absolute quiet. No visitors for a few days. We need to let the medication do its work." He was closing the circle, sealing the tomb. No visitors, no witnesses, just him and me and the soundproofed house. He grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and spun me around, aiming for the door. "Let's go," he said. He pushed me fast, ignoring the nurse, who was now on the phone, frantically calling for Dr. Russo. We burst out of the trauma bay into the hallway. The fluorescent lights blurred overhead. People jumped out of the way, startled by the sight of a man in a coffee-stained suit pushing a woman in a hospital gown at a run. We reached the automatic doors. The night air hit my face, cold and sharp, shocking my system. It smelled of exhaust and rain. It smelled like freedom, but it felt like a prison yard. The valet stand was right there. Julian's black Mercedes SUV was waiting, shining under the streetlights like a hearse. "Open the door," he shouted at the valet. The kid jumped, scrambling to open the passenger door. Julian wheeled me right up to it. "Get in," he hissed, grabbing me under the arms. "I can't," I wailed. "I can't stand." He didn't wait. He just lifted me, his fingers digging into my bruised ribs, punishing me even now. He shoved me into the leather seat, buckling the seatbelt around me, tight, too tight. He slammed the door, shutting out the noise of the city, shutting me in with him. He ran around to the driver's side and jumped in, firing the engine. The car roared to life. He put it in gear and stomped on the gas, tires screeching as we peeled out of the hospital driveway. I looked out the window, watching the hospital recede, watching the lights fade. I saw my parents standing on the curb looking confused. I saw the nurse running out the doors, shouting something I couldn't hear. But we were gone. He drove fast, aggressive, weaving through the Boston traffic, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. He didn't look at me. He didn't speak. The silence in the car was thick, heavy with the promise of violence. I pressed my head against the cool glass and closed my eyes. My hand slid under my hospital gown, clutching the fabric over my heart, and then I felt it, the hard, rectangular shape. The phone Nia's phone. In the chaos of him yanking me out of bed and the panic of the transfer, I had instinctively grabbed it. I had shoved it into the waistband of my underwear, hidden beneath the gown. It was there, pressing against my hip bone. It was still recording. I wasn't alone. Not really. I had Nia. I had her eyes and ears right there with me. Julian thought he had won. He thought he had isolated me again. He thought he was taking me back to the dungeon, where no one could hear me scream. But he was wrong. He was taking a witness with him. He turned onto the highway, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. "You almost blew it back there, Chloe," he said, finally, his voice low and calm, terrifyingly conversational. "You almost let that bitch inside your head. But don't worry. We have all weekend to fix you. We have all weekend to remind you who you belong to." He reached over and placed his hand on my thigh, squeezing hard. I flinched, but I didn't pull away. I just focused on the weight of the phone against my hip. "Drive," I thought. "Drive, you bastard. Because every word you say, every threat you make is going straight to the cloud. And this time when I go down, I am taking you with me." Suddenly the car slowed down, rapidly. Julian cursed, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "What is this?" he muttered. I opened my eyes. Ahead of us the road was blocked. Blue and red lights flashed in the darkness, illuminating the wet pavement. A police barricade or an accident, I couldn't tell. Julian checked his mirrors looking for a way out, but we were boxed in cars, in front, cars behind. "Damn it," he hissed. He rolled down his window as an officer approached, flashing a light into the car. "Sir," the officer said, "you need to turn around. The road is closed ahead." "Major accident?" Julian put on his best smile, charming but strained. "Officer, I am a doctor. My wife is injured. I am taking her home. We just came from the ER. Can we squeeze through?" The officer shined the light on me. He saw the hospital gown, the pale face, the bruises starting to darken on my neck. He saw the terror in my eyes. He paused, the light lingering on my face. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. This was it. Another chance. A second chance. Julian's hand moved on my thigh, gripping the flesh, digging in. A warning. A promise of pain. I opened my mouth to speak, to say the practiced line. "I am fine, just tired." But then I saw it. Behind the officer, through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw a car pull up on the shoulder. A familiar car. A beat-up Honda Civic. The door opened and a woman stepped out. She was wearing a trench coat, and she was holding a phone up, filming Nia. She hadn't left. She had followed us. And behind her, stepping out of the passenger side, was a man in blue scrubs. Dr. Russo. Julian followed my gaze. He saw them too. "No," he whispered, the color draining from his face. "No, no, no." The officer looked back, saw Dr. Russo running toward us, waving his arms, then looked back at Julian, his hand dropping to his holster. "Sir, turn off the vehicle." The officer ordered, his voice changing, dropping the politeness. "Turn off the vehicle and step out of the car." Julian looked at the officer, then at me, then at the open road behind us. For a split second, I thought he was going to run. I thought he was going to ram the police car and try to drive through. But then Dr. Russo was there, slamming his hand against the hood of the Mercedes. "Open the door," Dr. Russo shouted, his voice raw with fury. "Open the goddamn door." "Thorne, we saw the MRI. We saw the ribs. We know everything." Julian froze. His hand hovered over the gear shift. The mask was gone. There was no charm left, no authority, just the naked panic of a predator who realizes the trap has snapped shut on his own leg. I looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. It was a small, broken smile through split lips, but it was real. "It is over, Julian," I whispered. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. "Betrayal." "What did you say?" I reached under my gown and pulled out the phone. The screen was glowing, recording everything I said. "It is over." The officer ripped the driver's door open, grabbing Julian by the lapels of his expensive suit, dragging him out into the rain. "Get on the ground. Get on the ground. Now." I watched as they forced him down face first into the wet asphalt. I watched as they cuffed his hands behind his back, those hands that had hurt me so many times, those hands that were supposed to heal. I watched as Nia ran to my side of the car, yanking the door open, tears streaming down her face. "I got you," she sobbed, pulling me into her arms, avoiding my ribs, holding me tight. "I got you, Chloe. You are safe." I leaned into her, smelling her perfume, smelling the rain, smelling the sweet, impossible scent of freedom. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, but this time it wasn't the darkness of the closet. It was the darkness of sleep. Safe, dreamless sleep. The nightmare was over. The reckoning had begun. The silence in the trauma bay was broken only by the aggressive scratch of Julian's fountain pen against the clipboard paper. He signed his name with a flourish, a signature I had seen on 1,000 checks and 1,000 prescription pads, a signature that commanded respect and authority. This time, however, he was signing an AMA form against medical advice. It was a legal document that absolved the hospital of liability, so he could remove me from their protection. It was essentially a death warrant masked as a bureaucratic formality. He handed the clipboard back to the nurse, who took it with trembling hands. She looked at me one last time, her eyes wide with a silent apology. I could see she wanted to stop this. She knew something was wrong. But Julian Thorne was a giant in this medical community, and she was just a night shift nurse. The hierarchy of medicine was a powerful cage, and Julian held the keys. "There," Julian said, capping his pen and sliding it back into his breast pocket. "All done. I have already called the private nursing service. They will meet us at the house. I will have a full hospital bed set up in the master bedroom within the hour. It will be much more comfortable for you, Chloe, much quieter." He emphasized the word quieter, and a fresh wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. I knew what quiet meant in our house. It meant the soundproof walls of the master suite. It meant the heavy click of the deadbolt. It meant no one would hear me scream when he decided to punish me for the scene Nia had caused. My parents stood by the door looking relieved. They truly believed this was the best outcome. They believed their fragile, unstable daughter was being taken home by her hero husband to recover in luxury. "Thank you, Julian," my mother said, clutching her purse. "You are so good to her. We will come by tomorrow to bring some soup." "No," Julian said quickly, his voice smooth but firm. "Give us a few days, Eleanor. She needs absolute isolation to let the sedation work. I will call you when she is up for visitors." He was sealing the tomb. "Okay, up we go," he said, sliding his arms under me to lift me from the hospital bed to the wheelchair. I cried out as my broken ribs shifted, the jagged ends of the bone grinding against each other. The pain was blinding, white-hot, and all-consuming. I went limp in his arms, unable to fight, unable to hold myself up. He deposited me into the wheelchair and arranged the hospital blanket over my lap, tucking the edges in with a terrifying tenderness. "You are okay," he whispered for my ears only. "Save your strength. You are going to need it when we get home." He unlocked the brakes on the wheelchair and began to push me toward the exit. The wheels hummed on the linoleum floor, a low vibration that traveled up my spine. Every bump was agony. I looked around the emergency room, my eyes searching frantically for a lifeline, for anyone who could stop this. I saw patients in other bays, doctors rushing past with charts, security guards drinking coffee. Life was happening all around me, normal and chaotic, while I was being abducted in plain sight. We reached the waiting area. Nia was there. She was standing near the vending machines, her arms crossed over her chest, her face a mask of frustration and defeat. Leo was standing next to her, looking at his phone, oblivious to the war his wife had just lost. When Nia saw me in the wheelchair, she straightened up. She took a step forward, her mouth opening to say something, to shout, to protest. But then she saw Julian. She saw the cold, triumphant look on his face. She saw the way my parents were flanking him like a royal guard, and she stopped. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw helplessness in Nia's eyes. She was a lawyer. She dealt in facts, in evidence, in statutes. She knew that without proof, without my testimony, there was nothing she could do legally to stop a husband from taking his wife home. She had tried. She had pushed. But the system was built to protect men like Julian. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wanted to mouth, "Help me," but Julian's hand was resting on my shoulder, his fingers digging into the muscle near my neck. A warning. "Goodbye, Nia," Julian called out cheerfully as we breezed past them. "Drive safe." He did not wait for a response. He pushed the button for the automatic doors that led to the ambulance bay and the parking lot. The motors whirred overhead. The glass doors began to slide open, revealing the dark, rainy night outside. The cold air hit my face, smelling of exhaust and wet pavement. It smelled like the end. This was it. I was leaving the safety of the public eye. Once I was in his car, once I was back in that house, it was over. I closed my eyes, resigning myself to the darkness. I surrendered. "Stop." The voice was a thunderclap. It did not come from behind us. It came from in front of us. The automatic doors, which had been opening, suddenly stopped halfway. Standing in the gap blocking the exit was a wall of blue uniforms. I opened my eyes. Dr. Russo stood in the center of the doorway. He was not wearing his white coat anymore. He was in his navy scrubs. His arms crossed his face hard as granite. Flanking him were 2 large hospital security guards and a uniformed Boston police officer with his hand resting on his belt. The wheelchair came to a sudden halt. Julian stopped so abruptly that I lurched forward against the seatbelt, gasping in pain. "Move!" Julian barked, his voice cracking with sudden, genuine anger. "Get out of my way. I have discharged this patient. We are leaving." "No," Dr. Russo said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "You are not." Julian let go of the wheelchair handles and stepped around to the front, placing himself between me and the blockade. He drew himself up to his full height, inflating his chest, summoning every ounce of his authority as a department chief. "Do you know who I am, Russo?" Julian snarled, pointing a finger in the other doctor's face. "I am the chief of orthopedics at this hospital. I bring in $10 million a year in surgical billings. If you do not step aside right now, I will have your license. I will have your job. I will sue this hospital for unlawful imprisonment so fast your head will spin." My parents rushed forward from behind. "What is going on here?" my father demanded. "This is outrageous. We are taking our daughter home." "Officer, remove these people," Julian commanded, turning to the policeman. "They are interfering with a patient transfer." The police officer did not move. He did not look at Julian. He looked at Dr. Russo. Dr. Russo did not flinch at Julian's threats. He did not blink. He slowly reached behind him and picked up a large manila envelope from the security guard's hands. He pulled out a large, dark film sheet. "You can sue whoever you want, Julian." Russo said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "You can call the board. You can call the mayor. But before you do any of that, you are going to explain this to me." Russo turned and slapped the film onto the wall-mounted light box next to the exit doors. He flicked the switch. The fluorescent light hummed to life, illuminating the stark, black and white image of a human ribcage. My ribcage. The image was a chaotic map of skeletal trauma. But to the untrained eye, it just looked like bones. Julian sneered. "That is a standard X-ray of a rib fracture, you idiot." Julian scoffed. She fell down the stairs. "I told you that. Bones break when people fall." "Is this your big evidence?" Russo pulled a pen from his pocket. He stepped up to the light box. "Yes, bones break when people fall," Russo said. "But bones also tell time, Dr. Thorne. And as an orthopedic surgeon, you should know that better than anyone." Russo circled a jagged white line on the lower left side of the image. "This fracture here on the 7th rib, the edges are sharp, no remodeling. This happened tonight, consistent with your story about the stairs." Julian crossed his arms, looking bored. "Exactly. Thank you for confirming my diagnosis. But this," Russo said, moving the pen up to the 8th rib. He circled a faint, cloudy white blob surrounding a crack in the bone. "This is a callus formation. This fracture is in the reparative phase. The calcium deposit suggests this injury is about 3 weeks old." The silence in the hallway began to thicken. My father stopped blustering. Nia, who had crept up behind the group, moved closer, her eyes wide, and this Russo continued moving the pen to the collarbone. He tapped a spot where the bone looked crooked, thickened, and dense. "This is a malunion. This clavicle was broken approximately 6 months ago and was never set properly. It healed crooked." Russo turned around to face Julian. The pen was pointing at Julian's chest now like a weapon. "You told me she fell down the stairs tonight," Russo said. "But this X-ray shows a history of blunt force trauma spanning at least 6 months. These fractures are in different stages of calcification. You cannot get 3 different ages of bone breaks from one fall down the stairs, Julian." Unless she falls down the stairs exactly once every 3 weeks, Julian's face had gone pale. His mouth opened, but the arrogant retort died on his lips. He was a doctor. He knew the science. He knew he could not argue with calcification rates. It was biological fact. That is from her osteoporosis. Julian stammered, his voice losing its power. "I told you her bones are brittle. She bumps into things. Osteoporosis does not cause spiral fractures in the forearm," Russo interrupted, slamming a second film onto the light box. "This is a defensive wound, Julian. This happens when someone raises their arm to block a blow." My mother let out a small, strangled sound. She looked from the X-ray to Julian, and for the first time, I saw the blindfold slip. "And that is not all," Russo said. He reached into the envelope again and pulled out a piece of paper, a printout with red numbers highlighted. "I ran the toxicology screen you tried to stop me from running," Russo said. He held the paper up for everyone to see. "We found high levels of haloperidol in her blood. That is an antipsychotic medication used to treat severe schizophrenia. It is a chemical restraint, and the dosage in her system is enough to sedate a horse." Russo took a step closer to Julian, invading his personal space. "She does not have a prescription for haloperidol, Julian, but I checked the hospital pharmacy logs." "You do. You have been prescribing it to yourself under a false name for months." Russo's voice rose, echoing off the glass walls of the ambulance bay. "You have been drugging her. You have been keeping her weak, confused, and compliant so she could not fight back when you used her as a punching bag. That is not a husband. That is a predator." The word hung in the air. Predator. I looked at Julian. The mask was gone. The charming, successful doctor had vanished. In his place was a cornered animal. His eyes darted from the police officer to the exit, calculating, terrified. My father looked at the X-rays, then at the toxicology report. He looked at me sitting in the wheelchair, broken and drugged. He looked at Julian, the man he had treated like a son, the man he had defended just minutes ago. "You—" My father whispered, his voice shaking with a rage I had never heard before. "You did this." Julian stepped back, raising his hands. "Douglas, listen, he is twisting everything. She is sick. I was treating her." "Shut up!" my father roared. He lunged at Julian, but the police officer was faster. The officer stepped in, grabbing Julian's wrist and spinning him around. He slammed Julian against the glass wall of the vestibule. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for aggravated domestic assault, kidnapping, and the illegal administration of controlled substances." I watched as the handcuffs clicked around Julian's wrists. The metal sound was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. Julian was shouting about lawyers, about mistakes, about ruining lives, but no one was listening. Nia rushed past the police line. She fell to her knees beside my wheelchair. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not ask questions. She just wrapped her arms around my shoulders, burying her face in my neck, and began to cry. I looked up at Dr. Russo. He was breathing hard, his hair messy, his scrubs wrinkled. He looked exhausted. But as our eyes met, he gave me a small, grim nod. "It is over, Chloe," he said softly. "You are safe." And for the first time in 3 years, as I sat there in the cold draft of the open doors, I believed it. The silence in the ambulance bay was absolute, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent light box on the wall. Dr. Russo stood before the grayscale images of my skeleton, like a prosecutor presenting Exhibit A to a jury. He did not look at Julian. He looked at the bones. He traced the jagged white line on the 7th rib with the tip of his pen, creating a scratching sound that echoed in the quiet space. "This fracture here," Russo began, his voice devoid of emotion, just cold, hard facts. "This is a fresh break. The edges are sharp and clean. There is no sign of remodeling, no callus formation. This happened tonight, likely within the last 4 hours. It is consistent with a high-velocity impact, or as you claim, a fall down the stairs." Julian let out a breath, a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a scoff. Exactly, I told you she fell. What is the point of this theater, Russo? You are wasting everyone's time, confirming what I already diagnosed. Russo ignored him. He moved the pen up 2 inches to the 8th rib. He circled a cloudy white blob that surrounded a faint crack in the bone. The white area looked like a small cloud or a piece of cotton wool wrapped around the rib. But this, Russo said, tapping the film, this is not fresh. This is a soft callus. It is the body's attempt to bridge a fracture gap with cartilage and calcium. This process takes time. Dr. Thorne, you know the physiology as well as I do. This level of calcification indicates an injury that occurred approximately 3 weeks ago. I felt my mother stiffen beside my wheelchair. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. 3 weeks ago, the dinner party. The night I dropped the wine glass. The night Julian dragged me into the pantry because I was embarrassing him and slammed my side into the shelving unit. I had told everyone I had the flu the next day. I had laid in bed, unable to breathe deeply for a week. Julian shifted his weight. He adjusted his cuffs, looking bored, looking impatient. She fell 3 weeks ago, too. She is clumsy, I told you. She has balance issues. She trips constantly. I treated that fracture myself at home. Russo did not respond. He just moved the pen again, sliding it up to the collarbone. The clavicle. It looked wrong on the film, even to my untrained eye. It looked thick and gnarly, bent at a strange angle, like a tree branch that had snapped and grown back crooked. And this, Russo asked, his voice dropping an octave. What is this, Julian? It is a malunion. Julian said, his voice tight. That is an old injury. From 6 months ago, she tripped over the rug in the bedroom. A malunion, Russo repeated, turning to face the group properly for the first time. His eyes locked onto my father, then my mother, forcing them to look at the evidence, forcing them to see the history of violence written in calcium and marrow. A malunion happens when a fracture is not set properly, when it is not immobilized, when the patient does not receive medical care. This bone broke completely through 6 months ago, and she was never brought to a hospital. Was she? She was left to heal crooked. She was left to suffer. My father made a sound deep in his throat, a low growl of denial mixed with dawning horror. He looked at Julian expecting an answer, expecting a defense. But Julian was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. She refused to go. Julian muttered, She hates doctors. She begs me not to take her. Russo turned back to the light box. He slapped a second film up next to the first. This one showed my forearm, the 2 bones, the radius and the ulna glowing white against the black background. And this? Russo asked, pointing to a faint spiraling line wrapped around the bone. This is a spiral fracture. This does not happen from falling downstairs. This happens when a limb is twisted forcefully. It is a torque injury. It is what we see in wrestling matches or in domestic assaults when someone grabs an arm and twists until it snaps. I remembered that one vivid and clear. It was the night I tried to walk out the front door. He had grabbed my arm and spun me around, and I had heard the pop before. I felt the pain. He had told me. I pulled a muscle. He had wrapped it in an ace bandage and given me 2 blue pills and told me to sleep it off. Russo turned to face Julian fully now. The pen was gone back in his pocket. His hands were loose at his sides. Ready. We have a fresh break from tonight. We have a healing fracture from 3 weeks ago. We have a malunion from 6 months ago. And we have a spiral fracture from 4 months ago. These injuries are in 4 distinct stages of calcification. Dr. Thorne Russo stepped closer, invading Julian's personal space, pushing him back toward the glass doors. No one falls down the stairs on a schedule, Russo said, his voice rising, echoing off the concrete walls. No one has a catastrophic accident exactly every 3 weeks or every 4 months. This is not clumsy. This is systematic. This is a timeline of abuse. And you know it. You are an orthopedic surgeon. You know bone density. You know healing rates. You cannot lie to the X-ray. Julian's face was the color of ash. The arrogance was slipping, replaced by the cornered look of a predator who realizes the cage door has swung shut. He looked at my parents, his eyes pleading for them to intervene to save him one last time. She has osteoporosis, he stammered, desperate now, grasping at straws. Her bones are brittle like glass. I told you. She breaks if you touch her. Russo laughed a harsh barking sound that had no humor in it. Osteoporosis does not cause defensive wounds. Russo snapped. He pointed back at the forearm. X-ray, that spiral fracture, that is a defensive wound. That is what happens when someone raises their arm to block a blow. That is what happens when someone is fighting for their life. My mother let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. She looked from the X-ray to me, her eyes wide with horror and realization. She saw the cast on the screen. She saw the crooked collarbone. She saw the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. My father stepped forward, his face red, his fists clenched. He looked at Julian with a mixture of betrayal and rage that was terrifying to behold. "You told us she was sick," my father whispered, his voice shaking. "You told us she was mentally unstable. You told us you were taking care of her." "I was," Julian shouted, losing his composure, his voice cracking. "I was taking care of her. She is sick. She needs me." "You do not understand." "I understand perfectly," Russo interrupted. He walked over to the security guard and took a piece of paper from a manila folder. He held it up. It was a printout full of numbers and graphs with several lines highlighted in bright, angry red marker. "This is the nail in the coffin," Julian Russo said, his voice deadly quiet. "This is the toxicology screen I ordered, the one you tried so hard to stop me from running." Julian went still. He stopped breathing. He stared at the paper as if it were a death warrant. "We found haloperidol in her blood," Russo announced to the room loudly, clearly, so there clearly could be no mistake. Haloperidol is a powerful antipsychotic. It is used to treat severe schizophrenia. It is a chemical restraint used in psychiatric wards for violent patients. Russo looked at me, and for a second, his eyes were soft, full of apology, before he turned back to Julian with the fury of a righteous man. "There is no record of Chloe being prescribed haloperidol. There is no diagnosis in her chart that would warrant it, but I checked the hospital pharmacy logs. Dr. Thorne, you have been prescribing it to yourself under a false name." For 6 months, the silence in the ambulance bay was absolute. It was heavier than the lead apron in the X-ray room. It was the silence of a world shattering. "You have been drugging her," Russo said, spacing out the words like hammer blows. "You have been keeping her weak. You have been keeping her confused. You have been keeping her compliant, so she could not fight back when you used her as a punching bag. You have been turning your wife into a zombie so you could break her bones without her screaming too loud." Predator. The word hung in the air, unspoken, but deafening. My father let out a roar, a sound of pure primal fury. He lunged for Julian, but the police officer was faster. The officer stepped in, grabbing Julian's arm, spinning him around and slamming him face first into the glass wall of the vestibule. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest," the officer shouted, his voice echoing in the small space. "You are under arrest for aggravated domestic assault, kidnapping, and the illegal administration of controlled substances." I watched as the handcuffs clicked around Julian's wrists. The metallic snap was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the lock on the closet door breaking. It was the sound of the chains falling off. Julian was shouting now, screaming about lawyers, screaming about mistakes, screaming that they were ruining his life, but no one was listening. The mask was gone. The brilliant surgeon was gone. There was only a small, pathetic man pressed against the glass, trying to bargain with gravity. Nia rushed past the police line. She did not look at Julian. She did not look at the X-rays. She ran straight to me and fell to her knees beside the wheelchair. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders gently, so gently, burying her face in my neck. "I am sorry," she sobbed, her body shaking against mine. "I am so sorry I did not get you out sooner. I knew, and I should have done more." I leaned my head against her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her tears, feeling the solid reality of her presence. "You are here now," I whispered, my voice raspy and weak. "You are here now." My parents stood frozen, watching the police drag Julian toward the squad car. My mother was weeping, openly, clinging to my father's arm. My father looked old suddenly. The bluster and the pride were gone, replaced by the crushing weight of guilt. He looked at me, and then he looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Dr. Russo walked over to us. He looked exhausted. His scrubs were wrinkled. His hair was a mess. But he looked at me and gave a small grim nod. "It is over, Chloe," he said softly. "You are safe." And for the first time in 3 years, as I sat there in the cold draft of the open doors, watching the flashing blue lights reflect off the wet pavement, I believed it. I was broken. I was battered. I was drugged. But I was free. And as they loaded Julian into the back of the police car, I knew that the man who had owned me for 3 years was now the one who belonged to the state. The cage had changed owners. My name is Chloe, and I survived. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old wood, a scent that was supposed to convey justice and order, but to me, it smelled like a trap. The air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature that made me shiver in my witness chair. Despite the wool blazer Nia had bought me for today, I gripped the wooden railing so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to anchor myself in reality, trying to keep from floating away under the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. Julian sat at the defense table, looking impeccable. He wore a navy suit that cost more than my first car. His hair perfectly styled, his face a mask of sorrowful dignity. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a martyr. He looked like a brilliant surgeon who had been wrongfully accused by a hysterical wife and an overzealous legal system. Beside him sat Marcus Sterling, the most expensive defense attorney in Boston, a man known as the Great White Shark, not because of his white hair, but because when he smelled blood, he tore his victims apart. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket with a slow, deliberate movement. He walked toward the jury box, ignoring me completely at first, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sterling began, his voice rich and compelling. "We have heard a lot of emotional testimony today. We have seen X-rays. We have heard from doctors. But we must ask ourselves one simple question. Is it possible? That the narrative we have been fed is backwards?" He turned to me, then his eyes cold and predatory. "Mrs. Thorne, you have a history of mental health issues, do you not? You have been treated for anxiety, for depression, for paranoid delusions. I was treated for those things because my husband drugged me," I said, my voice trembling. Sterling smiled, a thin, patronizing smile. "Or perhaps you were drugged because you were a danger to yourself." He walked back to his table and picked up a thick medical file. "Tell me, Mrs. Thorne, are you familiar with the term Munchausen syndrome?" Nia stood up immediately. "Objection, Your Honor, calls for a medical conclusion from a lay witness." Sustained. "I will rephrase," Sterling said, unfazed. He looked at the jury. "Let me explain. Munchausen syndrome is a psychological disorder where a person feigns trauma or disease to draw attention or sympathy. They might even inflict injuries upon themselves to maintain the role of the patient." He turned back to me, invading my personal space. "Is it not true, Mrs. Thorne, that you enjoyed the attention your husband gave you when you were sick? Is it not true that you threw yourself down the stairs to keep him from going to conferences? Is it not true that those bruises on your arms were self-inflicted, caused by your own hands during fits of hysteria?" "No," I whispered, tears springing to my eyes. "That is a lie." "Is it?" "Sterling," boomed his voice, filling the room. "We have the testimony of your own parents who stated you have always been dramatic. We have the testimony of your brother who said you were jealous of your husband's success. Is it not possible that you broke your own ribs to frame a man who was trying to leave you?" He was spinning a web, turning the truth inside out. He was using the very isolation Julian had forced upon me as proof of my insanity. I looked at the jury, and I saw doubt creeping into their eyes. They looked at Julian, the handsome doctor. They looked at me, the trembling woman. It was working. The gaslighting had moved from my kitchen to the court of law. Sterling sat down looking satisfied. Julian leaned over and whispered something to him, and they both suppressed a small, confident smile. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Nia. She was not just my sister-in-law today. She was my advocate, the assistant prosecutor who had fought tooth and nail to be second chair on this case. She squeezed my shoulder, a silent promise. Then she stood up. Cross-examination. Your Honor, Nia said. She did not walk to the lectern. She walked straight to the defense table. She stopped in front of Julian Dr. Thorne. You are a man of science, correct? You deal in facts, in empirical evidence. Julian nodded, looking bored. Yes, I am. And you testified earlier that my client inflicted these injuries upon herself, that she possesses a rare psychological disorder that compels her to break her own bones for sympathy. That is my professional opinion, Julian said, smoothing his tie. Nia walked back to the prosecution table. She picked up a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a white square object with a cracked screen. It was an old smartwatch, a Series 3 with a pink band that had turned gray with age. Do you recognize this, Dr. Thorne? Nia asked. Julian squinted at it. No, I do not. My wife goes through electronics quite fast. She loses them or breaks them. This was found taped to the underside of the bed frame in your guest room, Nia said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made the jury lean forward. It is an old smartwatch. Chloe hid it there 6 months ago. She forgot it was there. The battery died a long time ago. But before it died, it was set to record. Julian shifted in his seat. He looked at Sterling, who frowned. It turns out, Nia continued, that this device has a voice activation feature. It records when decibel levels reach a certain threshold, and it uploads those files to a cloud account automatically whenever it connects to the home. Wi-Fi. Nia plugged the device into the courtroom AV system. She tapped the laptop screen. This recording is time-stamped 8:43 p.m. on the night of the incident. The night you claim your wife threw herself down the stairs because she was crazy. The courtroom went dead silent. Static hissed through the speakers. Then came a sound that made every person in the room flinch. Crash. It was the sound of the antique plate shattering on the floor. Then silence. Then a voice. Julian's voice, crystal clear, calm, and terrifying. Clear the table. Then the sound of shuffling dishes. The sound of footsteps. Then a thud. A wet, heavy sound like meat hitting a butcher block. A whimper. My whimper. Please, Julian. It was an accident. Then another thud. Louder this time, the sound of air being forced out of lungs. The jury was frozen. The stenographer had stopped typing. Julian's face had gone the color of old paper. He stared at the speakers as if they were possessed. The recording continued. The sounds of violence were graphic, sickening. The sound of a body hitting the floor. The sound of a kick connecting with bone. You are so clumsy, Chloe, Julian's recorded voice said. It was casual conversational, as if he were commenting on the weather. You really need to watch where you are going. Then the sound of rustling fabric, the sound of him peeling off the towel he had wrapped around his fist, and then the line, the sentence that would hang him. Next time, be more careful. I am a doctor. Chloe, I know exactly where to hit, so it hurts the most without killing you. I can break you in ways that will never show up on an autopsy. Remember that? Nia stopped the recording. The silence that followed was louder than the screaming had been. It was a vacuum, a void where Julian's reputation used to exist. Nia turned to Julian. I know exactly where to hit, so it hurts the most without killing you, she repeated, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Is that the professional opinion of a man treating a patient with Munchausen syndrome? Dr. Thorne. Julian tried to stand up. He pushed his chair back the legs. Screeching against the floor, he looked at the jury, but they were not looking at him with admiration anymore. They were looking at him with horror, with revulsion. He looked at Sterling, his shark, but Sterling was staring down at his legal pad, refusing to meet his client's eyes. The shark knew when there was blood in the water, and he knew it was his client who was bleeding out. It is fake, Julian shouted, his voice cracking, losing all its smooth composure. That is a deep fake. It is AI. She manipulated it. She is trying to frame me. Sit down, Dr. Thorne, the judge ordered, banging his gavel. But Julian did not sit down. He looked at me. I was sitting in the witness box, tears streaming down my face, but I was not looking away. "Not this time." I met his gaze. "You are crazy," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are nothing without me. I made you. I own you." The bailiffs moved in, grabbing Julian by the arms. He struggled, flailing like a drowning man, the mask completely gone, revealing the terrified, abusive child underneath. "I am a doctor," he wailed as they forced him back into his chair. "I save lives. You cannot do this to me." But they could, and they did. I looked at Nia. She was standing in the center of the courtroom, her head high, her hands steady. She had done it. She had found the one thing he couldn't explain away, the one thing he couldn't gaslight, the sound of his own arrogance. Julian slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. The great Dr. Thorne, the pillar of the community, the man who played God, crumbled into a heap of expensive wool and pathetic sobs. I took a deep breath. The air in the courtroom was still cold, but for the first time in 3 years it felt clean. It felt like the truth. The gavel did not make a loud sound when it struck the woodblock, but the impact reverberated through my entire body, shattering the last remnants of the fear that had held me captive for 3 years. The judge was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, and she looked at Julian with a mixture of disappointment and disdain that stripped him of every ounce of his unearned dignity. "Mr. Thorne," she said, and the omission of his medical title was the first cut. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, including the audio recordings and the extensive medical documentation of the injuries you inflicted, I am sentencing you to 15 years in a state penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served at least 12 years. Julian flinched physically, recoiling as if he had been slapped. 15 years. The number hung in the air, heavy and absolute, but the judge was not finished. Furthermore, she continued, due to the gross violation of your Hippocratic oath and the illegal self-prescribing of controlled substances used to incapacitate a victim, the medical board has moved to permanently revoke your license to practice medicine. You will never hold a scalpel again. You will never write a prescription again. You are no longer a doctor, Mr. Thorne. You are a convict." That was the moment he truly broke. I watched it happen, the arrogance, the entitlement, the God complex. It all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of a man. He slumped forward, his forehead resting on the defense table, and for the first time, the tears he wept were real. They were tears of self-pity, tears for the loss of his status, his power, his identity. He was not mourning the pain he caused me. He was mourning the death of the great Dr. Julian Thorne. I watched the bailiffs haul him to his feet. He looked back at me one last time, expecting perhaps to see triumph or malice. But I gave him neither. I looked at him with the cold indifference of a stranger. I felt nothing for him, not love, not hate, not fear, just a profound emptiness where he used to be. He was already a ghost to me, a bad memory fading in the harsh light of justice. As I walked out of the courthouse, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind me, I took my first step into a world that no longer contained him. The air outside was crisp and clean, smelling of autumn leaves and wet pavement. My parents were waiting for me at the bottom of the steps. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the truth that had been revealed inside. My mother's face was swollen from crying, and my father, usually so imposing, stood with his shoulders slumped, his hands deep in his pockets. When they saw me, they started forward, their movements hesitant, unsure. "Chloe," my mother choked out, reaching for me. I took a step back. It was a small movement, but it created a chasm between us. "Mom, stop," I said, my voice steady. "We are so sorry," my father said, his voice cracking. "We didn't know, Chloe. We honestly didn't know. He fooled us too. He manipulated everyone." I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the guilt eating them alive, but I also saw the history. The years of telling me I was dramatic, the years of siding with the golden boy, the years of valuing reputation over my safety. "You chose not to know," I said gently but firmly. "You chose to believe the convenient lie because the truth was too messy. You chose to believe that your daughter was crazy rather than believe she was in danger." "Oh, baby, please," my mother sobbed, taking another step forward. "Let us make it up to you. Come home with us. Let us take care of you." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I am not coming home. I have a new home now, and I need space. I need time to figure out who I am without your expectations and without your denial. But we are your family." My mother pleaded. "I know," I said, "and I love you. But right now, love isn't enough. I need safety, and I need people who see me. For now, that means I need to be away from you." I walked past them. They didn't try to stop me. They stood there on the courthouse steps watching me leave, finally respecting a boundary, because they had lost the right to cross it. I got into Nia's car. She was waiting behind the wheel, the engine idling. She didn't ask how it went. She just looked at my face, saw the peace settling there, and smiled, put the car in gear, and drove us away from the past toward the future. 2 hours later, I was standing on the balcony of my new apartment. It wasn't a mansion in Beacon Hill. It was a 2-bedroom condo in the Seaport district with big windows that let in the ocean light. It was mine, bought with the settlement money, signed with my name, decorated with my art. There were no soundproof walls here. There were no locks on the outside of the doors. There were no cameras watching my every move. Nia walked out onto the balcony carrying 2 glasses of deep red Cabernet. The wind whipped her hair around her face, but she looked relaxed, happy. She handed me a glass. "To freedom," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "To the truth," I replied. I took a sip of the wine. The liquid was rich and warm. It tasted like grapes and oak, not like fear. I remembered the night I spilled the wine on my wedding dress, the night the first slap happened. That memory tried to rise up, tried to make my hand shake, but I pushed it down. My hand was steady. I held the glass by the stem, watching the crimson liquid swirl. I looked out at the harbor, the lights of the boats reflecting on the dark water. Nia leaned against the railing, watching me. "How do you feel?" she asked. I closed my eyes. I focused on my body. I focused on my ribs, which had finally knit back together, leaving only achy reminders when it rained. I focused on my wrist, where the thumbprint bruise had faded to a memory. I focused on my lungs. I took a breath. It was a deep breath. It started in my diaphragm, expanded my belly, filled my chest, and pushed against my ribs. In the past 3 years, every breath had been shallow, guarded, measured against the pain of broken bones and the fear of taking up too much space. But this breath was different. It was huge. It was limitless. It filled me up completely, pushing into every corner of my being. And for the first time in 3 years, there was no sharp catch in my side. There was no restriction. "It doesn't hurt," I whispered, opening my eyes and looking at Nia. "What doesn't hurt?" she asked. "Breathing," I said. I took another one deeper this time, inhaling the salt air, inhaling the night, inhaling the rest of my life. "It doesn't hurt anymore." Nia smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Not a trap, but an anchor. "Then breathe." "Chloe," she said, "just breathe." And I did. The lesson. The most profound lesson from Chloe's harrowing journey is that abuse often wears a mask of respectability. Julian wasn't merely a violent husband. He was a pillar of the community, a celebrated surgeon who weaponized his status to silence his victim. This story forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that social standing, wealth, and professional accolades are never guarantees of character. Abusers often cultivate a perfect public persona to shield their private cruelty, utilizing their reputation as a fortress that makes it nearly impossible for victims to be believed. Furthermore, the narrative highlights the terrifying efficiency of gaslighting. By using his medical authority to label Chloe as unstable and clumsy, Julian nearly succeeded in erasing her reality. It reminds us that the most damaging chains are often psychological. The turning point, Nia's refusal to accept the convenient lie, teaches us the vital importance of looking beyond the surface. We must trust our instincts when we see inconsistencies in someone's story, just as Nia recognized that stairs don't have thumbs. Ultimately, this story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the undeniable power of objective truth. Julian thought he could control the narrative, but he couldn't control the science of bone calcification or the digital memory of a smartwatch. It serves as a powerful reminder that while lies may sprint, the truth eventually wins the marathon. Justice requires not just evidence, but the courage of allies like Dr. Russo and Nia, who are willing to risk their own standing to protect the vulnerable. It teaches us that silence is the abuser's greatest weapon, and speaking up is the only way to break the cycle. If you believe that justice was truly served for Chloe, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think 15 years was enough for what Julian did?